Hey guys. Tonight we are traveling to a place that history tried very hard to forget. We aren't going to Rome, we aren't going to Athens, and we aren't going to the pyramids of Egypt. We are going deep into the heart of southern Africa, to the mist-covered highlands of Zimbabwe. We are going to build a city out of nothing but granite and gravity. No cement, no mortar, no cranes, just millions of rocks, stacked one by human hands, creating walls so massive they would confuse explorers for centuries. But I have to warn you, your fingers are going to bleed, your back is going to ache, and you might get yelled at by a king who lives on a cliff. So, put on your work gloves, because we have a lot of heavy lifting to do. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment below and let me know, what city are you in right now? And what time is it there? And if you have ever built a Lego tower that crashed down because you didn't use glue, leave a brick emoji in the comments. So I know I'm not alone now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine you are standing in a valley filled with mist. The air is cool and crisp, smelling of wood smoke and wet grass. It is the 13th century, around the year 1250 AD. You are a subject of the Kingdom of Zimbabwe, a Shona-speaking civilization that is rapidly becoming the superpower of the region. You look up. Rising out of the mist, like the spine of a sleeping dragon, is a massive granite hill. But it isn't just a hill. It is crowned with walls. Massive, curving walls made of gray stone that seem to grow organically out of the rock itself. This is the hill complex. And down in the valley, an even bigger monster is being born, the Great Enclosure. You are a builder, a mason, but you don't have a trowel. You don't have a bucket of mortar. In Europe, builders are obsessed with sticking things together. They use lime, sand, and water to glue bricks. Here, you have a different philosophy. You believe in the power of friction. You believe that if you shape a rock perfectly enough, it doesn't need glue. It will sit there forever, held in place by its own weight. You walk toward the construction site. The ground is littered with granite flakes. The sound of clink-clink fills the air. Thousands of stone hammers hitting stone chisels. It sounds like a hailstorm made of metal. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact, the name Zimbabwe. The name of the country literally comes from the Shona phrase, Zimbabwe, which translates to houses of stone. Stone is the identity of this place. Most people in sub-Saharan Africa built with mud, wood, hand thatch, because it was practical and cool. But your kings wanted something permanent. They wanted something that said, I am here, and I am not moving. But where do you get the stone? You can just pick up random rocks from the field. They are round and useless. You need bricks. Flat, rectangular bricks. But you don't have a saw to cut them. You don't have dynamite to blast them. You look at the massive granite domes, the dwalas, surrounding the valley. They look like bald heads of giants emerging from the earth. These are your quarries. But how do you peel a mountain? You don't use force, you use temperature. You are about to witness the most ingenious, low-tech mining method in history. You walk to the base of a granite dome. A team of men has piled dry wood on top of a flat section of the rock. They light it. The fire roars. The rock gets hot. You can feel the heat radiating off the surface. Then you wait. You wait until the rock is baking hot. Then a woman runs forward with a clay pot of cold water. Splash, crack. A sound like a gunshot echoes through the valley. A perfect flat slab of granite, maybe 6 inches thick, pops off the surface of the mountain. It peels away like the skin of an onion. This is exfoliation mining. It works because granite expands when hot and contracts when cold. By shocking it, you force it to break along its natural stress lines. You don't have to cut the rock. You just have to annoy it until it sheds its skin. You look at the slab. It is huge, heavy, and flat, but it is still too big to be a brick. You need to break it down. You pick up a heavy, round, dolorite hammerstone. You are about to start the process of knapping. It is tedious. It is loud. And if you hit your thumb, you will wish you had never been born. But as you pick up that hammer, you realize something. You are building a puzzle with 1,000,000 pieces and no picture on the box, and the king expects you to finish it before he dies. You are standing at the base of the massive granite dome, wiping sweat and soot from your eyes. The fire and water trick worked. Lying at your feet are huge, jagged slabs of granite, the raw meat of the mountain. They are thick, heavy, and hot to the touch. Now, you have a physics problem. The construction site, the great enclosure, is down in the valley, about a mile away. You look at the slab. It weighs maybe 500 pounds. You look for a cart. You look for a wheelbarrow. You look for a donkey or an ox to pull it. You find none of them. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact that often confuses modern observers: the absence of the wheel. In Great Zimbabwe, and indeed in much of pre-colonial sub-Saharan Africa, the wheel was not used for transport. Why? Was it because people could figure out a circle? Absolutely not. You have toys with wheels. You have spindle whorls. You know what a circle is. The problem is the wheel. The engine. A cart needs an engine, usually a horse or an ox. But in this part of Africa, there is a tiny, buzzing, biological barrier to the wheel: the Tsetse fly. This fly carries sleeping sickness, trypanosomiasis. It kills horses and cattle efficiently. Without draft animals, a cart is just a heavy wooden box you have to pull yourself. And on the rocky, uneven terrain of the Zimbabwe plateau, a wheel would just break or get stuck. So, the most efficient engine for moving stone is you. You whistle. A team of 10 men gathers around the slab. You don't. To have cranes, you have leverage and rhythm. You slide green logs under the slab to act as skids. You wrap ropes made of baobab bark around the stone. Heave. The stone grinds against the earth. It moves 6 inches. Heave. Another 6 inches. This leads to a niche sensory detail: the architecture of sound. You can move heavy objects with a group of people in silence. If one guy pushes a second too late, the stone slips and someone loses a toe. So, you sing. The leader starts a chant, a rhythmic call, and response song that sets the tempo call. The mountain is heavy. Response: but we are stronger. The music of Great Zimbabwe was just for dancing. It was a construction tool. It synchronized the muscle spasms of 50 men into a single kinetic force. You aren't just dragging a rock. You are dancing it down the hill. The path to the valley is worn smooth by thousands of these trips. It is a highway of dust. But moving the big slabs is only half the battle. Sometimes you have to move them up. You look at the hill complex, high above you on the cliff. The king lives up there. He wants walls up there. So you have to drag these stones up a narrow, winding, vertical path. It is a nightmare of gravity. You form a human chain. You pass smaller stones hand to hand. For the big ones, you use counterweights and brute force. Your muscles burn. Your hands are raw from the rough granite. This brings us to a massive academic controversy: the slave labor debate. For centuries, European historians looked at walls like these, or the pyramids, and assumed slaves. It must be slaves. Who else would do this? Kampa, the old colonial view, argued that Great Zimbabwe was built by an enslaved populace under the whip of a tyrant or foreign overlords. Camp B, the modern Africanist view, argues that this is nonsense. There is no archaeological evidence of mass slave quarters or shackles. Instead, they propose the Zunde system or similar tributary labor. This is a Shona concept where community members work the chief's fields or build his walls in exchange for protection, food, and beer. Lots of beer. Archaeologists have found massive amounts of cattle bones and beer brewing pots near the worker camps. This suggests you aren't being whipped, you are being hosted. You are attending a work party. You drag the stone all day, and at night, the king throws a massive barbecue. It's a transaction. You give him walls, he gives you beef and belonging. You finally reach the valley floor. You dump the slab in the processing zone. You are exhausted. Your shoulders are bruised from the ropes. But you can rest because that slab is ugly. It is jagged. It has sharp edges. If you stack it like this, the wall will look like a pile of rubble. The king doesn't want rubble. He wants a wall that looks like a woven basket. He wants straight lines. You need to turn this raw, irregular slab into a neat, rectangular brick. You walk over to the napping floor. The ground here is carpeted in millions of tiny stone chips. It sounds like walking on broken glass. You sit down. You pick up a round, heavy stone ball. This is your dolerite hammer. Dolerite is harder than granite. It is the only thing that can hurt the stone. You pick up a piece of granite. You hold it on your thigh, protected by a thick piece of leather. Whack, a flake flies off, whack. Another flake, you are about to enter the trance of the mason. You have to do this 10,000 times. You have to shape the stone into a perfect loaf of bread. Flat on top, flat on bottom, with a rough face. And if you hit it too hard, the brick snaps in half, and you have to start over. You look at the pile of raw stone waiting for you. It looks like a mountain. You pick up your hammer, clink. The sound joins the thousands of other clinks, echoing off the valley walls. It is the heartbeat of the city, and you are just one cell in the muscle that is building it. You are sitting cross-legged on a pile of sharp granite chips. Your hands are covered in white dust, and your ears are ringing. Clink, clink. It is the sound of 1,000 men hitting rocks with other rocks. It is a symphony of tinnitus. You are holding a block of granite that weighs about 30 pounds. Your job is to turn this jagged lump into a brick. But you aren't using a saw. You aren't using a laser. You are using a laser. You are using a round, heavy ball of dolerite. A stone that is harder than granite. You strike the edge of the granite. Crack. A flake flies off and hits you in the shin. You don't even flinch anymore. Your shins are a map of scars. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact. The sheer volume of the masonry. The Great Enclosure alone contains an estimated 180,000 to 900,000 stone blocks. That is just one building. The entire city complex has millions. And every single one of them was hand-knapped. If you look closely at the walls of Great Zimbabwe, you will see that the blocks aren't perfectly square, like modern bricks. They are roughly rectangular, often shaped like a loaf of bread, flat on the top and bottom, but slightly rough on the face. This shape is crucial. You need the top and bottom to be flat to maximize friction. Remember, you have no mortar, no glue. The only thing keeping this wall from exploding outward is the friction between the stones. If you leave a bump on the bottom of a brick, it will wobble. A wobbling brick is a weak link. A weak link brings down a 30-foot wall. So you chip, you check the flatness, you chip again. You are looking for the sweet spot where the stone naturally wants to fracture. This leads to a niche, sensory detail. The ring of the stone. Experienced masons don. Just look at the rock, they listen to it. When you strike a solid piece of granite with no internal cracks, it sings. It makes a clear, high-pitched ting. If it makes a dull thud, throw it away. It has a hidden fracture. If you put a thud, Stone in the bottom of a wall, the weight of the 1,000,000 pounds of rock above it will crush it. It will turn to powder, the wall will slump, and the king will be very, very unhappy with you. You finish a brick. It is beautiful. It is uniform. You toss it onto a pile. A porter grabs it and runs toward the wall. You pick up the next raw lump. You do this from sunrise to sunset. But as you work, you notice something strange. Not all the walls look the same. You look at the wall your grandfather built. The inner wall. The stones are rough. They are different sizes. It looks like a jagged puzzle. Then you look at the wall you are building now, the massive outer wall. The stones are uniform. They are perfectly sized. They are laid in neat, even courses. This brings us to a massive academic controversy, the P, Q, and R styles. Archaeologists who study these walls have categorized them into different styles based on the quality of the stonework. Style P, rough, uneven blocks, laid in messy layers. Style Q, the masterpiece, uniform blocks, perfect coursing, neat finish. This is what you are making now. Style R, messy again, often using uncoursed wedges. Campa, the chronological evolutionists, argues that this represents a timeline of skill. The builders started bad EB, got really good Q, and then the civilization declined, and they got bad again, R. It is a story of the rise and fall of an empire, written in stone. Camp B, the status and function theorists, argues that this is nonsense. They say the different styles were used at the same time for different purposes. Maybe style Q was for the king's front door to show off, and style P was for the back wall of the cattle kraal, because cows don't care about aesthetics. They argue you did forget how to build. You just stopped wasting time on walls that didn't matter. You look at your style Q. Brick. It is perfect. You stand up to stretch your back. You walk over to the construction site where the porters are taking your bricks. You expect to see a trench in Europe. If you want to build a wall that is 11 meters 36 feet high, you dig a deep foundation. You anchor it in the earth. But here, you look at the ground. There is no trench. There is just dirt, or the uneven surface of the granite bedrock. You watch the master mason. He takes your brick. He brushes some dust off the ground. He places the brick directly on the soil. That's it. That's the foundation. This leads to the floating wall. Phenomenon. The walls of Great Zimbabwe literally sit on the surface. They are not anchored. To a modern engineer, this is terrifying. It sounds like a recipe for disaster, but there is a genius to it, because there is no mortar. The wall is flexible. It is fluid. If the ground shifts slightly, if the soil expands with rain or shrinks with drought, the wall doesn't crack like a rigid concrete wall would. The stones shift. They slide a millimeter here, a millimeter there. The wall flows over the imperfections of the ground. It is like a chainmail coat draped over the landscape. However, it is still a gamble. You see a section of an older wall that has collapsed. Why? Because a tree root grew under it, or an anthill undermined the soil. Without a foundation, you are at the mercy of the topsoil. But the king wants the wall now. He doesn't want to wait for you to dig a trench through solid granite. So you build. You place the stone. You rely on gravity. You are building a house of cards. But the cards weigh 40 pounds each. You watch the wall rise. It curves. Why does it curve? We will get to that later. But for now, you just know that a straight wall falls over. A curved wall stands. You hand your perfect brick to the mason. He slots it in. Click. It fits perfectly against its neighbor. No light shines through the gap. You feel a surge of pride. You made that. But then you look up. The wall has to go up 30 more feet, and you are going to have to carry every single one of those stones up a ladder that looks very, very shaky. You are standing 20 feet in the air, balancing on a rickety scaffold made of mopane wood poles lashed together with bark rope. The wind is picking up, whistling through the gaps in the platform. Below you, the ground looks very far away. Above you, the sky is a vast, indifferent blue. In your hands, you hold a 50-pound block of granite. And you have a problem. You have to place this stone on the wall. But remember, there is no cement. There is no sticky gray paste to forgive your mistakes. If you place this stone wrong, it won't just fall. It might trigger a chain reaction that brings down the entire section of the wall you've been building for 3 months. Welcome to the high-stakes game of dry stone walling. To the untrained eye, the Great Wall of Zimbabwe looks like a solid mass of rock. But you know the secret. It is actually a sandwich. There is an outer skin, the beautiful, neat style cube bricks you made. There is an inner skin, facing the interior of the city. And in the middle, there is the core. The core is filled with hearting, rubble, ugly stones, and chips. Your job is to balance these two skins, so they lean inward, hugging the core like a corset. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact: the batter, slope. If you build a dry stone wall, perfectly vertical, it will eventually fall outward due to the pressure of the rubble inside settling. So, you build with a batter. You look at the base of the great enclosure. It is massive, nearly 6 meters, 20 feet, thick. Now look at the top, towering 11 meters above. It narrows to about 1 meter thick. The wall leans inward. It is a pyramid that has been stretched. This slope shifts the center of gravity toward the middle of the wall. Gravity, which usually wants to knock things down, is now being tricked into holding the wall together. The heavier it gets, the tighter it squeezes. You lower your stone onto the coarse grind. It wobbles. A wobbling stone is a death sentence. It acts like a pivot point. You lift it up. You yell at your assistant on the ground. Shims. He tosses up a handful of small flat stone chips. You place a chip under the corner of the heavy block. You lower it again. Clunk. Solid. No wobble. You have just engaged the friction lock. But there is a flaw in your design. A flaw that terrifies you. In European dry stone walling, builders use through stones. Long rocks that go all the way from the outer skin to the inner skin, tying the two faces together like a staple. But here, in Great Zimbabwe, you don't. The two faces are independent. They are just leaning against the rubble core. This leads to a niche, terrifying reality. The bursting hazard. If the rubble inside settles too much, or if water gets in and expands, the core pushes outward. Since the faces aren't T-tied together, they can bulge. The wall develops a belly. And then, kaboom, the skin peels off like a banana. You are constantly checking for bulges. You are constantly praying that the batter is steep enough to hold back the pressure of thousands of tons of loose rock. This construction method brings us to a massive academic controversy. The indigenous origins, proof for centuries. Racist colonial historians, like Richard Hall, tried to claim that Great Zimbabwe was built by Phoenicians, or the Queen of Sheba, or Portuguese explorers. They could believe Africans could build this, but the architecture proves them wrong. If a European had built this, they would have used arches. They would have used mortar, and they definitely would have used through stones. The absence of these techniques proves that this is a 100% indigenous African innovation. It evolved locally. It has its own logic, its own physics, and yes, its own structural flaws. It is a masterpiece, but it is your masterpiece, not a copy of something from Rome. You place the next stone. You have to follow the golden rule of masonry. 1/2, 2/1. You never align the vertical joints. If you stack a stone directly on top of another stone, you create a running joint, a crack that runs straight down the wall. The wall will unzip. You have to stagger them. You are weaving with rock. You look down the line of the wall. It isn't straight. It curves. It waves like a snake. Why? Some say it is symbolic. The snake is a sacred animal, a symbol of fertility and water. But you, the builder, know the truth. Curved walls are stronger. A straight wall without mortar falls over easily. A curved wall has structural integrity. The curve acts like an arch on its side. It resists tipping. Plus, it allows you to dodge the massive granite boulders that are already sitting on the ground. You don't move the mountain, you flow around it. You are tired. The sun is setting. You place the last stone of the day. You climb down the shaky ladder. Your hands are shaking from the vibration of the hammer. You look up at the hill complex, looming above you. The king lives up there. And he has a new project. He wants you to build a wall on the very edge of a 300-foot vertical cliff. He says it's for defense. You think it's just because he likes the view. Tomorrow, you aren't just fighting gravity. You are fighting vertigo. You wash the dust off your face. You head to the fire for your ration of beef and sorghum beer. You need the calories, because tomorrow you are going to the high ground. And if you drop a stone up there, it doesn't just hit your toe. It hits the valley floor. You are breathing hard. Your lungs feel like they are burning, filled with the thin, crisp air of the plateau. You have left the valley floor behind. You have climbed the ancient ascent, a narrow, twisting path carved into the granite that squeezes between boulders so tight that in some places you have to turn sideways to pass. You are carrying a basket of stone chips on your head. You step onto the summit. The wind hits you instantly. It is stronger up here, whipping your hair and cooling the sweat on your back. You look down. The huts of the commoners in the valley look like tiny mushrooms. The great enclosure you were working on yesterday looks like a toy ring. Welcome to the hill complex, or the Acropolis. This is the penthouse of the Iron Age. This is where the king lives. But you aren't here to admire the view. You are here to solve an architectural nightmare. Down in the valley, the ground was relatively flat. Up here, it is a chaos of geology. Massive granite boulders, some as big as houses, are scattered everywhere as if a giant dropped a bag of marbles. The king wants you to build a wall, but he wants you to move the boulders. He wants you to build between them. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact: organic architecture. Great Zimbabwe is famous for fusing nature and construction. The builders didn't blast the landscape to fit the plan. They adapted the plan to the landscape. You walk to the edge of the cliff. There is a massive rounded boulder sitting precariously on the precipice. Instead of knocking it down, you start laying your bricks on top of it. You scribe the stone. You chip the bottom of your granite bricks to match the curve of the natural boulder perfectly. The wall flows out of the living rock. It looks like the mountain is growing a stone skin. It is beautiful, but it is also terrifying. You are placing stones on a ledge that is only 2 feet wide, with a 300-foot drop on one side. If you get dizzy, you die. You move to the western enclosure. This is the thickest, most fortified part of the hill. The wall here is 8 meters, 26 feet high, and 5 meters thick. Why? This leads to a massive academic controversy: the fortress versus temple debate. For decades, historians looked at this place and said, it as a castle, it as a fort. Look at those walls. They are impregnable. But you, the builder, notice something strange. You look at the top of the wall. It is solid. There are no crenellations, notches to shoot arrows through. There are no murder holes to pour boiling oil. In fact, the entrances are weirdly acoustic. If you shout, the sound travels. Campa, the military historians, argues that the sheer height is a deterrent. You don't need windows if the wall is impossible to climb. It was a stronghold against rival chiefs. Campi, the ritual social historians, argues that this is architecture of privacy. They believe the walls weren't meant to keep armies out. They were meant to keep eyes out. The king was sacred. He was not allowed to be seen doing mundane things like eating or sleeping. His power came from his mystery. The walls were a screen. They were the physical manifestation of his distance from the common people. You look at the wall. It feels less like a shield and more like a curtain made of rock. You continue working. You are building a doorway. But there is no wood for a lintel that can support this weight. So, you use stone beams. This leads to a niche, engineering detail, the stone lintel failure. Granite has high compressive strength. You can pile lots of weight on it, but terrible tensile strength. If you stretch it or bend it, it snaps. You place a long slab of granite over the doorway. It looks strong, but you know that if the wall settles, the pressure will snap that beam like a twig. So, you curve the wall around the entrance. You create a rounded gateway that funnels people in. It distributes the weight, and you make the doorway narrow. Why? To force people to enter one by one. If visitors come to see the king, they can T-march in as a group. They have to file in. Single file, heads bowed, to avoid hitting the low stone beam. It is architectural psychological warfare. The building itself forces you to be humble. You take a break. You sit in the shade of a massive boulder. You look at the interior of the enclosure. It is empty. It is filled with daga huts, mud and pole houses. The king doesn't sleep on the rocks. He sleeps in a beautifully polished mud house inside the stone walls. The stone is the shell, the mud is the home. You see the king's potters working nearby. They are making pots for beer. You realize that hauling water up this hill is the real labor. Every drop of water for the mortar of the floors, for the beer, for the king's bath, has to be carried up that narrow path on someone's head. You are building a city that is logistically impossible, powered entirely by human devotion and fear. The sun begins to set. The mist starts to roll back into the valley below. From up here, the great enclosure down there looks like a gray bracelet dropped in the grass. You feel powerful. You are standing on the roof of the world, but you also feel exposed. The wind howls through the crevices of the rocks. It sounds like voices. The Shona people believe that the ancestors live in these rocks. The boulders are the spirits. By building walls connecting the boulders, you are literally tying the spirit world together. You aren't just a mason. You are stitching the home of the gods. You pack up your hammer. You start the long descent. Going down is harder than going up. Your knees shake. You pass a narrow cleft in the rock. It is a natural megaphone. You hear a voice from above, the king or a priest, speaking in a normal tone. But down here on the path, it sounds like he is whispering right in your ear. The cave of the voice. We will talk about the acoustics later. But for now, it scares you. It feels like the mountain is watching you. You reach the bottom. The fire is waiting. The beer is waiting. But as you drink, you look at the great enclosure in the valley. The king has decided that the hill is too small. He wants a palace down here too, and he wants the walls to be bigger, thicker, more impressive than anything on the hill. He wants a wall that serves absolutely no purpose other than to say, I have more rocks than you. Tomorrow, you are going to start building the outer wall, and you are going to realize that sometimes architecture is about function. It's about pure, unadulterated ego. You are standing in the valley, craning your neck back so far it hurts. You are looking at the great enclosure, Imba Huru. Yesterday, you were on the hill, fighting gravity on the edge of a cliff. Today, you are on flat ground, but the challenge is no less terrifying. The king has ordered a new wall, but not just any wall. He wants a wall that is 11 meters, 36 feet, high. He wants it to be 250 meters, 820 feet, long, and he wants it to be 6 meters thick at the base. This is the outer wall. To put this in perspective, this is the largest single pre-colonial structure in sub-Saharan Africa. It consumes more granite than the entire hill complex combined. And you are building it around another wall. This brings us to the most confusing architectural feature of Great Zimbabwe, the parallel passage. You stand in the gap. To your left is the old inner wall. To your right is the new outer wall you are building. The gap between them is narrow, maybe 2 or 3 feet wide in places. It is a long, dark, curving corridor that runs for hundreds of feet. It feels claustrophobic. The walls loom over you, blotting out the sun. Why? Why build a massive, expensive wall just a few feet away from an existing wall? It's not a street. You can T-drive cattle through it easily. It leads nowhere specific. It just wraps around. This leads to a massive academic controversy, the fortress versus harem debate. For a long time, Victorian explorers looked at this massive outer wall and said, it's a bastion. It's to stop cannon fire. Even though there were no cannons in 13th century Zimbabwe, they assumed it was military. Kampa, the military theorists, argued that the double wall was a defensive trap. If enemies breached the first gate, they would be funneled into this narrow passage where defenders on top could drop rocks on their heads. But you, the builder, know this is nonsense. You look at the top of the wall. It is rounded. There is no walkway. There are no parapets. If a soldier stood up there, he would slide off. Camp B, the social gender historians, has a different theory. They call it the architecture of privacy. They argue that the great enclosure was not the king's house. It was the queen's compound. The king lived on the hill, masculine public eye. The first wife lived in the valley, feminine private. Low set of wall wasn't teat to keep arrows out. It was to keep eyes out. The parallel passage was a private corridor for the queen or the king to move from one part of the complex to another without being seen by the commoners. It is the architectural equivalent of a VIP tint on a car window. It screams, I am so important that you are not even allowed to see me walking to the bathroom. You pick up a stone. You are building the outer skin. This is style Q masonry at its finest. The stones are perfectly rectangular. You lay them in even horizontal lines. You check the batter, the slope. It has to be precise. The wall leans inward at an angle of roughly 10 degrees. This lean is what keeps it standing. If you built this vertical, the sheer weight of the core rubble, thousands of tons of loose rock dumped between the skins, would burst the wall open like a rotten melon. You are playing a game of containment. The skin holds the core supports the skin. You work your way up the scaffold. The higher you go, the more dangerous it gets. You don't have OSHA regulations. You have a pile of logs lashed together with bark. If you fall, you land on granite chips. But the king is watching, or at least his overseers are. They want the wall higher. Why, you ask yourself? It's already 20 feet high. No one can see over it. But the king wants 30, then 35. This brings us to a niche, psychological reality, the conspicuous consumption of labor. The wall serves no structural purpose at this height. It holds up no roof. It supports no second floor. It is purely a billboard. The king is telling the trade caravans coming from the coast, look at how many men I control. Look at how much surplus food I have. I can afford to have 500 men stacking rocks for a year just to make a wall that is too high. The height is the message. As you lay the stones, you notice a problem. The ground is uneven. There is a massive granite boulder in the way. In Europe, they would blast it. Here, you treat the boulder as a guest. You build the wall over the boulder. You curve the brickwork to hug the natural stone. This creates a flowing aesthetic. The wall looks like it is liquid stone. It undulates. It mimics the hills around it. It is beautiful, but it is a headache to build. You have to chip custom-shaped bricks to fit the curve of the boulder. You are halfway down the parallel passage. It is cool and dark. The wind rushes through the gap, making a low, moaning sound. Some of the workers say it is the spirits of the ancestors whispering. Others say it is just the wind hitting the rough texture of the granite. You keep working. Clink. Clink. You reach the section near the conical tower, which we will build later. Here, the wall reaches its maximum thickness. 6 meters. You are dumping tons of rubble into the core. You find broken pottery, old bones, and charcoal in the rubble. This leads to an archaeological gold mine. The fill of the wall contains the trash of the 13th century. By analyzing the garbage inside the wall, future scientists will know exactly what you ate for lunch: beef and sorghum. And when you built this, carbon-14 dating the charcoal, you are inadvertently building a time capsule. The sun is setting. You are perched 30 feet in the air. You look down at the massive gray snake you have created. It separates the sacred inside from the profane. Outside, to the people outside, it is a terrifying barrier of blank stone. To the people inside, it is a warm, protective embrace. You realize you are standing on the very top of the Great Wall. You are 32 feet, 11 meters, in the air. The scaffold sways sickeningly in the wind, which is much stronger up here than it was on the ground. You look down, the people in the valley look like ants. If you fall, you won. Just break a leg. You will become part of the archaeological record. You are holding a stone, but the king doesn't want you to lay it flat. He wants you to tilt it. This brings us to the signature artistic flourish of Great Zimbabwe, the chevron pattern. If you look at the massive outer wall of the great enclosure, near the top, there is a band of decoration that runs for about part of the circumference. It looks like a double zigzag, a row of V shapes. To a modern eye, it looks like a nice border on a sweater. To you, the builder, it is a structural nightmare. Remember the rule of dry stone walling: gravity and friction. Flat on flat, the chevron pattern violates this rule. You have to take a rectangular brick and stand it on its edge, tilted at a 45-degree angle. Then you place another brick next to it, tilted the opposite way. They lean against each other, but they want to slide. Because there is no mortar to glue them in that awkward position, you have to pack the triangular gaps behind them with tiny stone chips and dust. You are essentially building a mosaic that is trying to destroy itself. One slip, and the V collapses into a U, and the whole row unzips. This leads to a niche sensory detail: the shadow machine. Why go to all this trouble? The stone is gray. The wall is gray. From a distance, you can barely see the texture, but the king knows something about the African sun. The chevron pattern isn't about color. It is about shadow. Because the stones are tilted, they create deep, dark recesses. When the tropical sun hits the wall, the V shapes pop out in high contrast. Black shadow against white granite. It is a shadow machine. It only works because the sun is so bright. On a cloudy day, the pattern disappears. It is architecture that relies on the weather to exist. You place a stone. You jam a shim under it. You pray to the ancestors. You look along the line. The pattern runs for about 100 meters, 330 feet, but it does run all the way around. It stops. Why? This brings us to a massive academic controversy: the fertility versus astronomy debate. The chevron pattern is only found on the section of the wall that faces the southeast. Camp A, the astronomers, argues that this is intentional alignment. The pattern marks the arc of the sun or moon at specific times of the year. It aligns with the rising sun at the summer solstice. The wall is a giant calendar. Camp B, the fertility cult, argues that the pattern represents the snake in Shona mythology. The snake is the symbol of fertility. It represents the male force, the rain, and the continuity of life. Camp B points out that the great enclosure was likely the residence of the royal wives. The pattern is a fertility stamp. It marks the womb of the kingdom. The snake pattern protects the women inside. Furthermore, the Shona word for a young man is Jaya, related to the python, and a barren woman is one who has killed the python. The symbolism is deep. You, standing on the wall, don't know about solstices, but you know about snakes. The wall curves like a snake. The pattern looks like scales. It feels like you are riding a giant granite python. You finish a section. Your fingers are raw from handling the sharp edges of the tilted stones. You look out over the valley. From this height, you can see everything. You can see the smoke from the huts, you can see the cattle kraals, and you can see the daga pits where women are mixing mud. We will get to the mud later, but it reminds you that this city isn't just gray. It is red and gray. But there is something else growing inside the great enclosure. You look down into the parallel passage. At the end of it, near the thickest part of the wall, another team of masons is building something strange. It is a wall. It is an house. It is a tower. But it has no windows. It has no doors. It is a solid cone of rock, the conical tower. The king wants it built. He wants it to look like a grain bin. But he doesn't want to put grain in it. He just wants a massive, solid pile of rocks that serves absolutely no practical purpose other than to be tall and round. You sigh. Constructing a wall is one thing. You can stand on a wall. Constructing a solid cone, how do you get to the middle? How do you keep the sides from bulging out? You realize that you are about to start the most confusing puzzle of the entire city. And you suspect that, centuries from now, people will still be standing in front of that tower scratching their heads, asking, "What is that thing for?" You climb down the scaffold. The sun is setting, casting long, jagged shadows from your chevron pattern. The snake on the wall glows orange. It is beautiful. It is useless. It is perfect. You head to the fire. You need to rest your hands, because tomorrow you are going to build the Tower of Mystery. You are standing at the base of a structure that defies logic. Inside the massive outer walls of the great enclosure, nestled in a corner like a forgotten chess piece, is the conical tower. It is 10 meters, 33 feet, high. It is 5 meters, 16 feet in diameter at the base. It tapers perfectly to the top, and it has no door, no window, no hollow center. It is a solid, 100% dense pile of granite bricks. You pick up a stone. You hand it to the man standing on the layer above you. He hands it to the man above him. You are building a layer cake of stone. But unlike the walls, which have a rubble core, the conical tower is meticulous. Every layer is carefully leveled. Every stone is shaped. Why? If you just dumped rubble in a cone shape, the sides would burst out. To keep a solid cone standing for 800 years without mortar, you need the internal friction to be perfect. The stones have to interlock. It is a 3D jigsaw puzzle. This brings us to the mainstream historical mystery. What is it? When European explorers like Karl Mach in 1871 first saw this tower, they went wild with speculation. "It is a phallic symbol," they shouted. Because, well, Victorians saw phallic symbols everywhere. It is a copy of the Temple of Solomon. It is a watchtower. Except you can climb it. But you, the builder, know what it looks like. It looks exactly like a grain bin. In a traditional Shona homestead, grain is stored in a cylindrical mud structure raised off the ground, often with a conical thatched roof. Grain is life. Grain is wealth. Grain is wealth. Grain is power. By building a massive, solid stone grain bin, the king is making a statement. My granary is eternal. My wealth is solid rock. I have so much food that I don't even need to put it inside. The symbol of the food is enough. This leads to a niche, ritual detail, the spirit eye. There is no door, but there is a decoration near the top, a band of darker stone, dentelle, pattern, little teeth. Some oral traditions suggest that while the tower is solid, The ground beneath it is special. It might cover a sacred spot, or the tower acts as an antenna. The Shona religion involves communicating with ancestors through spirit mediums, svikiro. Perhaps the tower is a focal point, a lightning rod for the spirits. You don't ask the priests, you just stack the stones. But there is a problem. As the tower gets higher, the diameter gets smaller. The workspace shrinks. At the base, you had 10 men working. Now, at 20 feet up, there is only room for 2. How do you get the stones up? You can lean a ladder against it easily because the surface is curved and slippery. So, you build a spiral scaffold out of wood around the tower. It looks like a wooden corset. You haul the stones up in baskets. Your arms ache. You place the capstone. It is a flat, round slab. The tower is finished. It looks like a giant, gray beehive. But the great enclosure isn't just gray stone. You look down at the floor. It is currently dirt. The king wants to walk on dirt. He wants daga. This brings us to a massive misconception, the gray ruin fallacy. Today, tourists visit Great Zimbabwe and see bare stone walls rising from the grass. It looks stark, monolithic, and gray. But in 1300 AD, this place was colorful. It was vibrant. The stone walls were just the skeleton. The flesh was daga. Daga is a special type of cement made from granite sand, clay, and dung cow manure. When you mix it right, apply it, and polish it with a smooth stone, it dries as hard as concrete. But it isn't gray. It is red or reddish brown, and it is shiny. You are about to cover the floors, and maybe even the lower parts of the stone walls, with this red plaster. The city isn't going to be a gray ruin. It is going to be a red palace. You walk to the daga pit. This is women's work, traditionally. But for a project this size, everyone helps. You stomp in the pit, you mix the clay and the dung. It squelches between your toes. The dung adds fiber. It prevents the clay from cracking as it dries. You carry buckets of the red mud into the enclosure. You spread it on the floor. You smooth it. Then, you build steps. Not square steps. Rounded steps. They look like flowing lava. They curve up to the platforms where the huts will sit. You build daga seats, curved benches built right into the walls. This leads to an academic controversy. The living architecture. Because daga is organic mud and dung, it decays. The rain melts it. Archaeologists have found layers and layers of daga floors. Every few years, the floor would crack or get dirty. The king wouldn't sweep it. He would order a new layer of daga poured on top. The floor level of the city kept rising. The city was constantly eating itself and growing taller. This means the archaeology is a layer cake of history. The bottom layer is 1200 AD. The top layer is 1450 AD. By digging through the floor of the hut you are building, future scientists will find the lost beads, the broken pots, and the gnawed bones of the feasts. You finish the floor. It is smooth, red, and cool. You step back. The contrast is stunning. The towering gray walls with the chevron pattern in black shadow. The bright red polished floor. The yellow thatch of the hut roofs. It is a masterpiece of texture and color. It is a palace fit for a king who trades with China and Persia. But speaking of trade, you look at the king's hut. It is positioned high on a platform. You notice something. If you stand on that platform and speak in a normal voice, can anyone hear you? The walls are high. The valley is deep. You are about to discover the acoustic engineering of the site. Did the builders accidentally create a giant speaker system? Or did they know exactly what they were doing? You walk to the cave of the voice. On the hill, you shout, and the valley answers. You are standing in the center of the great enclosure, near the base of the massive conical tower you just finished. The sun is blazing, but the high walls cast cool, deep shadows. It is quiet down here. The wind is blocked by the 30-foot granite curtain. You can hear your own breathing. You can hear the scratch of a lizard on the stone. Then you hear a voice. Bring the cattle. You jump. You spin around. You look left, right, and behind the tower. There is no one there. The voice was clear, distinct, and authoritative. It sounded like a man standing 3 feet away, whispering into your ear. But you are alone. You look up, high above you. Towering over the valley on the granite cliff is the hill complex. You see a tiny figure standing on the edge of the precipice, near the eastern enclosure. It is the king, or perhaps the high priest. He is over 300 feet, 100 meters, away vertically and horizontally. He didn't shout, he just spoke, and you heard him. This brings us to the mainstream historical marvel, the acoustic amphitheater. Great Zimbabwe isn't just a visual masterpiece. It is an audio weapon. The geography of the valley creates a natural amphitheater. The granite surfaces reflect sound waves with almost zero absorption. But the walls, the curved, batter-sloped walls you spent years building, act as parabolic reflectors. They capture the sound coming from the hill and focus it into the valley. Conversely, if you stand in a specific spot in the cave of the voice on the hill, you can hear the conversations of the commoners in the valley below. It is the medieval equivalent of a bugged room. The king doesn't just watch you, he listens to you. This leads to a niche, spooky detail, the calling of the royal sister. Oral traditions suggest that the acoustics weren't just for spying. They were for ritual. The king often had a royal sister or a spirit medium, svikiro, who lived in the cave on the hill. When she entered a trance and spoke with the voice of the ancestors, her voice would drift down into the great enclosure. Imagine the psychological impact. You are a pilgrim visiting the city. You stand in the shadow of the conical tower. Suddenly, the air itself speaks to you. It tells you to pay your tribute. It tells you the ancestors are watching. You pay quickly. You try it yourself. You are skeptical. You wait until the king leaves the cliff. You signal to your friend, who is still up on the hill packing up tools. You cup your hands. "Can you hear me?" you say, in a normal speaking voice. A few seconds later, the answer drifts down, clear as a bell. "I hear you. Stop playing and get back to work." It sends a shiver down your spine. This architecture dissolves distance. It creates a panopticon of sound. This leads to a massive academic controversy: design versus coincidence. Did the builders know they were building a speaker system, or was it an accident? Camp A, the acoustic engineers, argues it was intentional. They point to the specific curvature of the Great Wall. It curves exactly in a way that focuses sound from the hill into the main gathering area. They argue that pre-colonial African builders had a sophisticated understanding of sound, similar to the builders of Greek theaters. Camp B, the skeptics, argues that it is just a property of granite. Granite is hard. Hard things echo. If you build enough stone walls in a rocky valley, you get echoes. They say the spying aspect was just a happy accident that the king exploited later. Regardless of intent, the effect is real. You realize that the wall you built isn't just a barrier. It is a membrane. It vibrates. The king uses this power when the traders arrive from the coast. The men with the strange turbans and the beads, they are brought into the enclosure. They hear the voice from the rock. They are terrified. They offer better prices. And what are they trading for? You look at the porters entering the main gate. They aren't carrying stone anymore. They are carrying leather bags that act heavy. You catch a glimpse of the contents: yellow dust, gold, and long curved white tusks, ivory. This is the fuel of the city. You thought you were building a house for the king. You were building a vault. Great Zimbabwe is the terminal of a trade network that stretches from the gold mines of the interior all the way to the Indian Ocean coast, modern-day Mozambique. And from there to India and China, you walk over to the processing area. You see craftsmen working. They aren't tea-napping stone. They are melting gold. They are taking the dust and turning it into beads, wire, and foil. You see a man carving soapstone, a soft, workable stone. He is carving a bird with human lips and toes like lightning. The Zimbabwe bird. You pick up a reject piece of gold foil. It is thin, lighter than a leaf. You realize that while you broke your back moving 4 tons of granite, this tiny piece of yellow metal is worth more than your entire life. The stone walls protect the gold. The gold pays for the cows. The cows feed the masons. The masons build the walls. It is a cycle, a machine, but machines need fuel. You look at the fires melting the gold. You look at the fires cooking the beef. You look at the fires cracking the granite in the quarry. Fire needs wood. You look up at the hills surrounding the city. When you started building this city as a young man, those hills were covered in dense Brachystegia Miambo woodland. Now, they are bald. The trees are gone. You have to walk 10 miles just to find firewood. The city is hungry. It eats wood. It eats grass for thatch. It eats soil for daga. You feel a vague sense of unease. The walls are strong. The gold is plentiful. The voice in the cave is loud, but the land is getting tired. You can hear it in the silence between the echoes. The cattle have to walk further to graze. The soil in the fields is getting thin. You are building a monument to eternity, but you are building it on an ecological time bomb. But that is a problem for the future. You are an old man now. Your hair is gray, matching the granite walls you spent your life building. Your back is permanently bent, shaped by the weight of 1,000 stones. You sit by the fire in your hut, but the fire is small. It is a pathetic, sputtering flame, fed by twigs and dried cow dung. There are no logs left. This brings us to the slow, silent killer of Great Zimbabwe. Ecological exhaustion. When you started this project as a young man, the valley was a paradise. The hills were thick with Brachystegia trees. The streams ran clear. The grass was waist-high. Now you look out the door of your hut. The hills are bald. They are stripped naked. Every tree within a 30-mile radius has been cut down. Why? To burn the rock in the quarries. To melt the gold. To cook the beef for 20,000 people. To keep the king warm on his windy hill. The city ate the forest. You cough. The air in the valley is thick. This leads to a niche, atmospheric reality, the valley smog. Great Zimbabwe is located in a bowl. In the winter, thermal inversions trap the air. Imagine the smoke from 5,000 cooking fires, the fumes from the gold smelters, and the dust from the cattle, all trapped under a lid of cold air. The city is choking. You are breathing a soup of carbon and dust. Archaeologists, studying human remains from this period, have found evidence of chronic respiratory diseases. The builders didn't just break their backs. They ruined their lungs. But the biggest problem is in the air. It the ground. You walk to the edge of the settlement. You see the cattle herds. They are massive. Thousands of cows. This brings us to the mainstream historical fact, the cattle economy. In Shona society, cattle are not just food. They are walking bank accounts. A man's wealth is counted in hooves, but 20,000 cows eat a lot of grass. They have grazed the land down to the bedrock. Their hooves have churned the soil into powder. When the rains come, if they come, the water does. Soak in. It runs off. It takes the topsoil with it. Erosion. You see gullies opening up in the fields like wounds. The crops are failing. The maize and sorghum are stunted. The city is starving itself. This leads to a massive academic controversy, the ecological suicide versus climate shift debate. Why was Great Zimbabwe abandoned around 1450 AD? Campa, the eco-pessimists, argues that it was carrying capacity. The city grew too big for its resources. It was a classic Malthusian trap. They cut down the trees, ruined the soil, and polluted the water. It was a localized environmental collapse caused by human greed. Camp B, the climate historians, argues that it was their fault. They point to the Little Ice Age. Around this time, global temperatures dropped. Rainfall patterns in southern Africa shifted. The region became drier. Camp B argues that even if they had managed the trees perfectly, the drought would have finished them. The rivers dried up. The king lost his rainmaking power. You, the builder, don't know about global climate patterns. You just know that the stream where you used to wash the resin off your hands is now a mud puddle, and the women have to walk half a day just to find water. You see the people leaving. It starts as a trickle. A family packs up their pots and heads north. Then another. They are following the rumors. Rumors of a new prince, Nyatsimba Mutota. He has gone north to the Zambezi Valley. He has found salt. He has found elephants. He has found water. He is founding a new empire, Mutapa. You look at the walls you built, the great enclosure, the hill complex. They are magnificent. They are the tallest structures, south of the pyramids. But you can't eat granite. The walls are strong, but the stomach is empty. You walk into the great enclosure one last time. It is quiet. The king is still there, but his court is smaller. The feasts are less frequent. The gold trade is shifting north. You touch the style Q bricks you laid 40 years ago. They are still perfect. They haven't moved a millimeter. You realize the tragedy of architecture. The stone outlasts the dream. You built a shell for a society that grew too fat for its shell. You sit in the shadow of the conical tower. You see a vine growing out of a crack in the daga floor. Nature is coming back. The trees will return. The grass will return. The termites will eat the thatched roofs. But the stone will stay. The stone will stand there, silent and gray, waiting for someone else to come along and wonder who moved it. You stand up. You are too old to walk to Mutapa. You will stay here. You will watch the lights go out. You will be the guardian of the ruin. But history doesn't stop just because the people leave. Fast forward 400 years. The city is silent. The huts are gone. The walls are covered in creepers and baboons. Then, new men arrive. They are wearing boots and pith helmets. They carry guns and Bibles. They look at your walls. They look at your tower, and they shake their heads. Africans could have built this. They say, you are about to witness the second tragedy of Great Zimbabwe. First, it lost its people. Now, it is about to lose its identity. These new men aren't builders. They are thieves, and they are racists. They are going to loot the gold you smelted. They are going to steal the soapstone birds you carved. And they are going to write a history book that writes you out of it. The year is 1871. The mist still clings to the valley, just as it did when you were hauling stones 600 years ago. But you are no longer the builder. You are a descendant. You are a Karanga man, living in the shadow of the great ruins that your people now call Zimbabwe. You are standing at the base of the hill, holding a spear. Beside you stands a man who looks and smells like he has walked across the entire continent. He is wearing strange, heavy clothes that must be boiling in this heat. He has a wild beard and eyes that dart around like a hungry lizard. His name is Karl Mach. He is a German geologist, and he is about to insult your entire family tree. You have led him here because he promised gifts. He promised guns. But mostly, he just wanted to see the big stones. You point up at the hill complex. There, you say, the house of the king. Mach scrambles up the path. You follow him. He reaches the top. He stands before the massive granite walls. You expect him to be awed. You expect him to ask, how did your ancestors move these rocks? But he doesn't. He pulls out a knife. He walks over to a wooden lintel, a beam supporting a doorway. It is old, hard, and dark. He scrapes it. He sniffs it. Cedar, he shouts. It smells like cedar. This brings us to a mainstream historical myth, the Queen of Sheba fallacy. Mach decides right then and there that this wood must be cedar of Lebanon. And who used cedar of Lebanon? King Solomon. Therefore, this cannot be an African city. This must be the legendary Ophir, the source of Solomon's gold, built for the Queen of Sheba. He looks at you. He looks at the wall. Africans did not build this, he declares. This is Phoenician or Jewish. You stare at him. You are confused. My grandfather, his grandfather built this, you say, or try to explain. We still build walls like this for our cattle. Mach shakes his head. He isn't listening. He is blinded by the racism of his time. He cannot conceive that a civilized structure could be created by a people he considers savages. To him, the stones are too straight. The tower is too round. It must be an import. This leads to a massive academic tragedy, the denial of authorship. For the next century, this will be the official story. Maps will label this place King Solomon's Mines. Novels like H. Rider Haggard's will be written about white queens ruling savage tribes from these ruins. It is an intellectual theft. They aren't stealing the stones yet. They are stealing the credit. They are looking at the masterpiece of your culture and saying, someone else must have done this for you. Mach runs around the ruins. He finds a piece of a soapstone bowl. Look, he cries. This pattern, it looks vaguely Phoenician. It is a geometric pattern common in Shona pottery for 1,000 years. But Mach sees what he wants to see. He is engaging in pareidolia, seeing faces in clouds or seeing Solomon in a cattle kraal. You watch him sketch the ruins in his notebook. He draws the walls taller than they are. He draws the tower straighter. He is fixing the architecture to make it look more Mediterranean. He is rewriting history in real time. But the worst part is the wood, the lintel he scraped. It wasn't cedar of Lebanon. It was Tamboti, Spirostachys africana. This leads to a niche, botanical fact, the scented trap. Tamboti is a local African hardwood. It is incredibly hard, termite-resistant. And, crucially, when you cut it, it releases a sweet, spicy sandalwood. Like scent. Mach smelled the wood, and his brain jumped to the Bible. If he had asked you, you could have told him, that is Tamboti. We use it for furniture. Do not burn it, or the smoke will make you sick. But he didn't ask. He packs up his notebook. He looks at the ruins one last time with a possessive gleam in his eye. The world must know, he whispers. I have found the lost city. You lead him back down the hill. You feel a heavy weight in your chest. You don't know it yet, but this man is the vanguard of an invasion. He will go back to Europe. He will tell stories of gold and ancient white civilizations in the heart of Africa. And then others will come. Not geologists, looters. They will come with the Cecil Rhodes Company. They will come with the Ancient Ruins Company, a real, terrifyingly named limited liability corporation formed solely to pillage. They just scrape the lintels. They will tear the place apart, looking for Solomon's gold. You are standing at the gateway of the era of destruction. Mach gives you a few beads as payment. He walks away, dreaming of fame. You look at the beads. They are cheap glass. You look at the wall. It stands silent, gray, and majestic. It knows who built it. The stones remember your sweat. The daga remembers your feet. But for a long time, the world is going to listen to the man with the notebook, not the man with the memory. You drop the beads in the dust. The sun sets on the empire of Mutapa and rises on the colony of Rhodesia. And the first casualty of this new era is the truth. The mist has lifted, but a new kind of fog has settled over the valley. It is the dust of destruction. The year is roughly 1902. You are standing in the great enclosure again. But the silence you cherished is gone. It has been replaced by the sound of shovels, picks, and the shouting of men who are in a hurry. You are watching a man named Richard Nicklin Hall. He has been appointed the curator of Great Zimbabwe by the British South Africa Company. His job officially is to preserve the ruins, but to preserve them, he believes he has to clean them. To Hall, the deep layers of red daga clay, the broken pottery, the iron spearheads, and the charcoal remains of the huts are just filth. They are the native debris that is obscuring the original white architecture, so he orders it removed. This brings us to one of the greatest archaeological tragedies in history. You watch as Hall's laborers dig. They dig down 1 foot, 2 feet, 5 feet. They are shoveling away the history of your people. They are removing the evidence of how the walls were built, who lived there, and what they ate. They are taking the layer cake of history and throwing the cake in the river, leaving only the plate. Hall eventually removes up to 12 feet, 3.5 meters of stratified deposits from the great enclosure. He proudly declares that he has cleared the site. In reality, he has lobotomized it. He has erased the context that would have proven, without a doubt, that this was an African city, but Hall isn't the worst of them. Before him, there was the Ancient Ruins Company Limited. Yes, that was a real company. In 1895, the colonial government actually granted a corporate franchise to a group of treasure hunters. Their business model was simple: loot every stone ruin in Rhodesia for gold. They tore apart hundreds of smaller sites. They ripped open graves. They smashed skeletons to get at the gold bangles on their wrists. You watch them work. They are efficient. They are brutal. They don't see ancestors. They see bullion, but amidst the destruction, they find something they can melt down. They find the birds. You are standing in the eastern enclosure of the hill complex, the most sacred spot on the precipice. A workman's pick hits something soft. He pulls it out of the dirt. It is a pillar of gray soapstone, steatite, about 3 feet tall. Perched on top of the pillar is a bird. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact: the Zimbabwe bird. 8 of these statues were eventually found. They are the Mona Lisas of African art. They aren't realistic birds. They are stylized, majestic creatures with long necks, strong talons, and a strange human-like posture. Today, this bird is on the flag of Zimbabwe. It is on the money. It is the soul of the nation. But in 1902, to the looters, it is just a curiosity, a grotesque idol. You look closer at the bird. It has the beak of a raptor, perhaps a batelor eagle, the Shona shapungu. But look at the feet. Eagles have claws. This bird has toes. They wrap around the pedestal like human fingers. And look at the lips. Birds don't have lips. This bird does. It is a hybrid. It is a transformation. This leads to a niche, spiritual detail. The lightning conductor. In Shona religion, the battler eagle is the messenger of God. Maurice. It travels between the sky and the earth. It brings the rain. It brings the lightning. Oral traditions suggest that these birds weren't just statues. They were lightning rods for the spirits. They were placed on the highest walls of the hill complex. When the king or the spirit medium wanted to speak to the ancestors, the bird acted as the antenna. The spirit landed on the bird. The fact that they are carved from soapstone is crucial. Soapstone is soft, easy to carve, but also resistant to fire and heat. It is the perfect material for a vessel that holds celestial fire. But the looters don't care about celestial fire. They care about Cecil Rhodes. Cecil John Rhodes, the imperialist tycoon who named the country after himself, becomes obsessed with these birds. He buys them. He steals them. He takes them to his mansion in Cape Town. He puts them in his library. He tells his guests they are Phoenician. He uses the sacred antennae of your ancestors as conversation pieces for his dinner parties. This sparks a massive academic controversy. The species debate. What kind of bird is it? Campa, the ornithologists, argues it is strictly a batelor eagle, Pterothopus ecaudatus. The beteler is famous for its acrobatic flight and its lack of a tail. The statues have short tails. Camp B, the mythologists, argues it is the fish eagle Haliaetus vocifer. The fish eagle is the bird of the water, the bird of the pool. Why does this matter? If it is a battler, it represents the sky and war. If it is a fish eagle, it represents the water and peace. But there is a third option. Look at the pattern carved on the side of the pedestal. It is a diamond pattern. This represents the crocodile. The bird sky, standing on the crocodile, water. It is the union of heaven and earth. The king, the bird, standing on the foundation of the ancestors, the crocodile. It is a political manifesto carved in stone. It says, I rule everything from the clouds to the riverbed. You watch the workmen crate the birds. They pack them in straw. They carry them down the hill. The antenna is disconnected. The line to the ancestors is cut. The hill feels empty. The wind howls through the crevices, but there is no voice anymore. The cave of the voice is silent. Hall continues his cleaning. He strips the walls bare. He removes the daga steps you smoothed with your own hands. He removes the pottery your wife made. He leaves only the granite skins. He turns Great Zimbabwe into a skeleton. He wants it to look like a European ruin, clean, sterile, and dead. He succeeds. You stand by the gate as the wagons roll out. They are heavy with gold, soapstone, and iron. They leave behind a tourist attraction. You realize that the greatest theft wasn't the gold. It was the context. By removing the dirt, they removed the proof that people lived here. They turned a home into a mystery. They made it easy for future generations to say, who built this? Because they destroyed the evidence of the builders. You pick up a handful of the discarded soil. The rubbish Hall threw on the spoil heap. You see a bead. You see a piece of bone. You see a fragment of a daga floor painted red. You put the bead in your pocket. You are the keeper of the truth now. The birds are gone. The king is gone, but the walls are still standing. And as long as the walls stand, you are standing by the side of the spoil heap, the massive mound of dirt that Richard Hall dug out of the great enclosure and dumped unceremoniously outside the walls. To him, this dirt was just debris blocking the view. But to you, picking through the pile in the quiet of the evening, it is a treasure chest. You spot a glint of color in the dust. You pick it up. It is NT gold. It is NT stone. It is a shard of pottery. But it is NT, the thick, red clay pottery of the Shona people. It is thin. It is pale green. It is smooth as glass. This is Celadon. Specifically, it is Longquan Celadon from the Ming Dynasty of China. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact, the global supply chain. Great Zimbabwe was not an isolated island in the bush. It was a major node in the Indian Ocean trade network. While you were stacking granite blocks in the valley, a sailor in a junk ship was navigating the South China Sea. A merchant in Persia was packing glass beads. A sultan in Kilwa on the coast of Tanzania was minting coins. All of them were working for you. Or rather, they were working for the gold you controlled. The House of Stone was paid for by the hunger of the world for African gold. You sift through the dirt again. You find a bead. It is blue glass. This is Persian faience. You find another. It is red. This is Indian carnelian. You realize that the floor of the great enclosure was once littered with the trash of the world. The king drank beer from Chinese bowls. The queen wore beads from India. The priests burned incense from Arabia. This leads to a niche, economic detail. The invisible middlemen. Great Zimbabwe is 250 miles from the ocean. How did the porcelain get here? You didn't go to the ocean. The ocean came to you. The Swahili traders from the coast walked the gold route up the Save River Valley. They brought the cloth and the beads. But here is the trick. The king of Great Zimbabwe didn't let them in. Archaeological evidence suggests the foreign traders were kept outside the city walls, in a specific trade quarantine zone. Why? To maintain the mystique. The king took the foreign goods and distributed them himself. He told his people, "Look what I summoned from the spirits." He monopolized the glamour of the distance. But digging deeper into the pile, you find something else, something local, a piece of cotton cloth. This brings us to an academic controversy, the spinning debate. For a long time, colonial historians claimed that sub-Saharan Africans didn't have woven cloth before Europeans arrived. They just wore skins. But in the soil of Great Zimbabwe, archaeologists found spindle whorls, small clay discs used for spinning thread. Kampa, the diffusionists, argued these were imported tools used by Arab traders living there. Camp B, the indigenous industry school, argued that the Shona were growing indigenous cotton, Gossypium herbaceum, and weaving their own textiles on a massive scale. The cloth trade wasn't just importing silk, it was exporting cotton. You rub the spindle whorl. It is simple, handmade, and undeniable proof of an industrial past that Hall tried to throw away. You look up at the Great Wall. You realize that these stones weren't just a house. They were a vault. The conical tower, the solid grain bin, was likely the symbol of the state reserve. But instead of gold bars, the reserve was cattle and grain, which could be converted into gold, which could be converted into power. The system was sophisticated, it was global, and it was African. You put the Chinese shard in your pocket. It has traveled 7,000 miles to get here, only to be dug up by a racist curator and thrown on a trash heap. But it survived. It shines in the moonlight, a tiny green piece of evidence that this valley was once the center of the world. But the looting of 1902 was just the beginning of the assault. As the 20th century rolls on, the attack shifts from the physical to the psychological. The white settlers of Rhodesia are building a nation on your land. And to justify it, they have to prove that you didn't build this city. You are about to witness the most absurd era of state-sanctioned censorship in archaeology. They aren't just stealing the birds anymore. They are stealing the truth. The mist of the 19th century has burned off, replaced by the harsh, bright sun of the mid-20th century. The year is 1965, or perhaps 1970. You are standing inside the small museum built near the entrance of the Great Zimbabwe ruins. The air conditioning, a rare luxury, is humming, but the atmosphere is suffocating. You are watching a man in a beige suit. He is a government official from the Rhodesian front. He is holding a red pen. He is standing over a display case that contains a timeline of the site. He crosses out a date. He crosses out the word African. He writes in the margin, "Origins unknown." This brings us to the era of state-sanctioned censorship. The colony of Rhodesia, led by Ian Smith, has declared independence from Britain to maintain white minority rule. Their entire political legitimacy rests on the idea that they are the civilizers of a savage land. If it is admitted that Great Zimbabwe, a city of stone, gold, and trade, was built by the ancestors of the black majority they are oppressing, their narrative collapses. If Africans built this before the white man arrived, then they don't need civilizing. So, the stones must be silenced. This leads to a mainstream historical fact: the censorship of the guidebooks. The Rhodesian government issued official orders to the National Museums and Monuments Commission. The order was simple. No official publication could state unequivocally that Great Zimbabwe was of African origin. Instead, they had to promote the mystery. It could be anyone, the guidebook said. Maybe Greeks, maybe Phoenicians, maybe aliens. Anyone except the people living right next door. You look at the archaeologist standing next to the official. His name is Peter Garlick, or perhaps Roger Summers. He looks furious. He has a piece of paper in his hand. It is a lab report. It contains the results of radiocarbon dating carbon-14. He tested the timber lintels, the ones Mach thought were cedar. He tested the charcoal from the fires you built to crack the rocks. The dates are irrefutable, 1200 AD to 1450 AD. This is the Iron Age. It is centuries after the Phoenicians and the Queen of Sheba were dead. It fits perfectly with the rise of the Shona states. Science has spoken, but the official in the beige suit doesn't care about isotopes. The dates are wrong, he says. The wood must be old wood that was reused. This brings us to a massive academic controversy. Science versus ideology. Garlake refuses to lie. He publishes his findings. He writes books proving the African origin. The government responds not with debate, but with deportation. Garlake is forced into exile. Other archaeologists are silenced or fired. The site of Great Zimbabwe becomes a battlefield. You, standing in the museum, realize that archaeology is a dangerous profession. Digging up the truth can get you fired. But the censorship goes deeper. This leads to a niche, absurd detail, the Bantu inhibition. Some colonial theorists tried to argue that the Bantu mind, their term, was incapable of understanding the concept of a right angle or a straight line. They looked at the curving walls, the very walls you built to be stronger and more organic, and used them as proof of inferiority. Look, they said, they could build straight. It wobbly. They twisted the architectural genius of the site into an insult. They ignored the fact that a straight dry stone wall falls over. They ignored the fact that the curve is stronger. They weaponized geometry against you. You walk out of the museum. You walk to the great enclosure. The tourists are there. They are listening to a guide. Welcome to the mystery of Rhodesia, the guide says, reciting the government script. We believe a lost white race built this. You look at the black stonemasons repairing a section of the wall nearby. They are using the exact same techniques their ancestors used. They are knapping the stone with dolorite hammers. Clink, clink. The evidence is literally happening in the background, but the guide ignores it. You touch the wall. The stone feels indifferent. It has survived the collapse of the kingdom. It has survived the Zulu raids. It has survived the treasure hunters. It can survive the politicians. You realize that a lie requires constant maintenance. You have to keep reprinting the guidebooks. You have to keep firing the scientists. The truth just sits there. It is heavy. It doesn't move. Eventually, the politicians will get tired. The lie will run out of funding. But the granite has nowhere to go. The sun sets on the Rhodesian era. The Bush War is raging in the countryside. The sounds of gunfire are getting closer. Not the arquebuses of the Portuguese, but the AK-47s of the guerrillas. The country is about to change names. It will drop the name of the colonialist Rhodes, and it will take the name of the ruin, Zimbabwe. You are about to witness the final act. The thieves are going to be forced to return the loot. The birds are coming home. The year is 1980. The air in the stadium in Harare is electric. The Union Jack of Rhodesia is lowered for the last time, and a new flag rises. It has stripes of green, gold, red, and black. And in the corner of the flag, sitting on a red star, is a familiar shape. It is the bird, the soapstone eagle you saw carved 600 years ago. The one looted by the treasure hunters has become the symbol of a new nation. The country is no longer named after the thief, Rhodes. It is named after your work, Zimbabwe. The House of Stone. You are standing at the airport. You are waiting for a very special passenger. The birds are coming home. Not all of them. Some are still held captive in museums in Cape Town and Europe. But the most important ones are returning. You watch the crate being unloaded from the plane. It is treated with the reverence of a returning head of state. This brings us to a niche, bizarre historical detail. The divorced bird for decades. One of the famous soapstone birds was literally in two pieces, separated by continents. The bottom half, the pedestal with the crocodile pattern, was in the Museum of Ethnology in Berlin. The top half, the bird itself, was in Cecil Rhodes's bedroom in Cape Town. The bird had been decapitated by history. But in 2003, through a complex diplomatic exchange involving German presidents and Zimbabwean officials, the pieces were reunited. You watch as the two halves are placed together. The fracture line is visible, a scar of colonialism, but the stone fits. The lightning rod is whole again. You walk through the museum at Great Zimbabwe today. The beige-suited censors are gone. The text on the wall is clear. Built by the ancestors of the Shona people. The lie is over. The stone has outweighed the politicians, but the fight isn't entirely finished. This leads to the final academic controversy, the universal heritage versus local ownership debate. Some Western museums still hold pieces of Great Zimbabwe, gold beads, pottery, and perhaps a bird or two. Kampa, the Universalists, argues. These artifacts belong to humanity. They are safer in London or New York. If we send them back, they might be stolen or damaged by political instability. Camp B, the repatriationists, argues. They are the soul of the nation. You don't keep someone's grandfather's bones in a display case just because you have better air conditioning. They need to be home to function spiritually. You look at the empty plinths in the Hill complex. You realize that a museum is just a warehouse of dead things. The birds weren't meant to be looked at behind glass. They were meant to sit on the cliff edge, feeling the wind, catching the lightning. Until they are back on the wall, the circuit is incomplete. You walk out of the museum and climb the path to the great enclosure one last time. It is late afternoon. The tourists have gone. The baboons are reclaiming the walls, barking at the setting sun. You touch the granite blocks. They are warm. They have absorbed the heat of the day. You find a section of the wall where the stones are loose. You see the style Q brickwork, neat, orderly. Perfect. You remember the pain of napping them. You remember the weight of the basket on your head, and you realize something profound. The gold you mined, melted down and spent centuries ago in India or Portugal. The ivory, carved into chess, sets for European kings. The wood, rotted to dust. But the wall? The wall is still here. The wall is the only thing that could be stolen. It was too heavy to put on a ship. It was too big to put in a museum. The sheer, stubborn mass of your labor saved it. You built something so inconveniently large that it defied the greed of the world. You sit in the parallel passage. The shadows are long and cool. The acoustic trick still works. You can hear the wind sighing through the rocks on the hill. It sounds like a breath. The city is breathing. It is dead. It is just resting. The daga floors may be washed away, but the skeleton is indestructible. You look at your hands. In this life, they are modern hands holding a camera or a phone. But in the memory of the stone, they are the hands that held the Dolorite hammer. You are the builder. You are the architect. You didn't just stack rocks. You stacked meaning. You prove that civilization is about straight lines or cement. It is about cooperation. It is about 1,000 people agreeing to move a mountain, stone by stone, just to say, we were here. You stand up. The sun dips below the horizon. The chevron pattern on the high wall fades into the gray twilight. The shadow machine turns off for the night. You turn to leave, but you don't. Say goodbye. You say Tikazoanan. We will see each other, because the stone is going anywhere. It will be here tomorrow. It will be here in 1,000 years. Waiting for the next person to come along and ask, how did they do that? And you will know the answer. Gravity, patience, and a lot of beer. The final stone, and so the hammer falls silent. The dust of the quarry settles back onto the earth. The chanting of the work gangs fades into the gentle rustle of the savanna grass. You can put your burden down now. You don't have to carry the granite anymore. You don't have to climb the hill. The wall is built. It is strong. It is finished. Imagine you are lying on a mat of soft, woven grass in the center of the great enclosure. The massive walls rise up around you, blocking out the wind, blocking out the world. You are held in a bowl of silence. The stone retains the warmth of the sun, radiating a gentle heat that relaxes your tired muscles. Above you, the sky turns from purple to black. The stars come out, the Southern Cross, the Milky Way. They frame the top of the circular tower like a crown. The ancestors are watching, but they are not judging. They are just resting, like you. You are safe here. The walls you built will protect you. The history you lived is written in the rock, and it cannot be erased. You have done enough. Let the weight of the stone ground you. Let the coolness of the mist soothe you. The city sleeps. The valley sleeps. Drift into the shadow of the Great Wall. Sleep. The story ends here. Good night.